Envisages, the theme envisages a world where we value, not only value difference, but actually celebrate difference. So thank you for joining us as we celebrate and as we discuss some actions that all of us can take to combat bias, stereotypes, to value diversity, and to espouse inclusivity in all that we do at work and in life in general. So I'm Madhuri Bhuyan. I am a leader for growth marketing at Virtusa, and I'm extremely privileged today to facilitate this discussion between this extremely impressive panel of individuals. And I'm also very happy and excited to share that we have in the room with us Virtusa's CEO, Nitesh Pangal. Hi, Nitesh. Can I ask you to say a few words with us?
Sure. Hello. Where should I stand? Here? Okay. Hi. Thank you very much for coming. I know it's a lot of your time that you've contributed, so I'm so happy and excited that we have our esteemed panel here. I was thinking about what I should say, but it reminded me of my days in Japan, and anybody who has, been on the Shinkansen, right, which is the bullet train in Japan. There are 3 types of bullet trains, right? So they wanted to name those bullet trains, and the first one they said, they named it after sound, because sound travels very fast. And then they created a train which was faster than that. So they said, what should we name it, right? So they said, we will name it light, because light comes before sound, as we all know. And then they made an even faster train. Now everybody's scratching their head, what should they name it as? And after a lot of deliberation, they named it for thought, because thought travels faster than light or sound, right? And I was thinking about how, we should look at, what we are celebrating today, and it came to my mind that the speed of thought and the diversity of thought are so important in the current climate that we have. And to me, inclusivity and diversity is always about thought, right? Given all the changes that are happening around us, whether it's geopolitical, whether it's macroeconomic, all kinds of things changing, technology being completely revolutionized around us, I feel that the speed and diversity of thought is so important in our businesses, in our personal lives, and for our planet. And somebody once told me what is good for the planet is good for business. At first I did not believe it, but if you start connecting, you will realize that actually what is good for the planet is good for business, right? So I think to me, inclusivity and diversity is that of thought, and we have to move it at pace. We don't want to do it by 2058. So I think it's all of our responsibility, to participate in this, to act on it, to accelerate it, and that's really the way I think about it. So thank you very much, and thank you for moderating the panel, and I hope this is a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nitesh. Turning to the discussion, the topic for a panel discussion today is aligned to the theme of National Women's Day. It's Accelerate Action, Creating Balance, and Shaping the Future. So I'll turn to the panel. As a panel, I think espouses inclusivity, it espouses rich, experience, as well as very, very unique perspectives that they're bringing to this conversation. I'll ask you all to introduce yourselves and to share a little bit of insight into your story.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, before I introduce myself, I think Clara Zetkin, who started this entire exercise so many years ago, 1910, I'm sure wherever she is, she would be very happy to see this panel, because I today feel what a typical woman leader feels when she walks into a boardroom where you have all the men people, and there is only one woman leader. So at this August panel, I'm the only man here. So I can empathize, I can exactly feel what you go through. On that note, this is Sanjay. I run a few different businesses for Virtusa. I've been associated with the company for the last 18 plus years now and counting, and very glad to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marnie Mayer. I'm with Allied World. I'm one of the heads of product for Global Claims, and I've been with that company for about 15 years.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Biz. I'm with Iron Mountain. I've been with Iron Mountain for just over about 10 years now, and I'm a director in IT responsible for our global billing program.
Janine Kane, I'm the Vice President, Strategic Business Solutions for Reliance Matrix, and I'm coming up on 28 years with the company. It's been a journey.
So, thank you, everyone. And in the spirit of accelerating action, let us quickly get started on this conversation. So, Janine, what does accelerate action mean to you, and what do you think are some of these small but powerful actions that any of us can take in order to bring about inclusivity into the organization?
You know, the thing that strikes me the most is being an active listener. I think that oftentimes it's really easy to zone out when you're having a conversation. I really have to, it's hard work to sit there and make sure that you're focused, you're actively listening, you're validating the messaging that you're getting, you're encouraging that open communication, and you're building trust and relationships by doing the active listening. On the flip side, you're also going to be either walking away, best case scenario, right? You're going to learn something new. You're going to get a different viewpoint. You're going to be able to take just a step back and think, like, it's not all about the way Janine thinks about things, even though I'd like it to be. Worst case scenario, there is none, right? You're going to develop a relationship. You don't have to agree with everything everybody says. You don't have to agree with what their journey is. But what you can be is respectful and acknowledge people and make them feel good about that it's a safe place to share. So I think that's critical, honestly, in today's world. It's really easy to zone out and think about the next thing you need to do, or multitask, and try and do multiple, and you lose that active listening component.
Very right. And I think that I completely agree with you. And I think focus, sometimes what happens is we are in a pattern of behavior, and we don't focus and we don't recognize that we're not being inclusive.
Right.
And I think that is the biggest miss that we have sometimes. Now, many of us don't want to not be inclusive,
right,
but we just don't think about it.
Right.
So I think breaking that pattern is absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Moving from action to challenges, Marni, what do you think are the biggest challenges that women face in leadership, and what do you think might be solutions or ways past that?
Sure, I think some of the biggest challenges women face are around mental health and flexibility, work-life balance, representation in senior leadership roles, pay equity, gender bias and stereotypes. I do think that there's a lot of ways to address that. You can't control what other people do or what your company does, but from a personal perspective, I think that taking, and speaking to that topic, pay equity, things like that, you can't necessarily control what your company does, but from your personal perspective, finding targeted training and development, taking advantage of those opportunities, looking for sponsorship and networking. I think building your personal board of directors is very important. Those people don't even need to know that they're on your board of directors, but finding a diverse group of leaders who can be your sponsors, who can help you make key decisions in your career, provide support and guidance. Those are very key elements that you can do on your own to try and work past some of those barriers and develop that. And I do think working towards that, sponsorship and networking is really key to those aspects.
What do you think, Nicole?
No, I completely agree. I think a lot of the time it's being able to have the confidence in your voice, allow it to be heard, and find, to your point, your board of directors, your advocates that are going to help reinforce that voice. Because you can sit in a room, and if someone's constantly questioning a decision that you make, you have to have people behind you that are supporting that your decision is a decision. They're then giving credence to your position, to your opinion, and that then just trickles into confidence in other areas where you're more vocal about boundaries, more vocal about inclusivity, and how to bring in those behind you. So the people that are letting you through the door, how do you then turn that around and then help bring others to that door?
I have also always felt that there are some softer angles to it, the invisible angle of challenge, which, to what you said, Sanjay, is that there are not too many women in leadership as you rise. And that itself becomes a challenge because, even in your board of directors, it's very difficult sometimes to find other women who can be part of that board and who can share their journey with you, which makes conversations like this, so much more valuable because we all sort of face the same challenge. It's always great to also have men who understand that.
In fact, what is that? All right. In fact, I remember a quote from Larry Fink where they talked about the fact that they would not be extending relationships with organizations where they do not have X number of women on the board, right? So that's a very bold step for someone like that to take and comment that, openly. I think those kinds of actions definitely is something that is needed. To your point about certain things that people don't realize, and unless you take bold steps to make that very visible to people.
Okay. No, and I remember a few years back when that became a law in India, and I remember the huge scramble that happened when companies tried to get people, women on the board. And the fact that there was a scramble, none of us were aware of how much of a disparity. We would see data, but when you see action, you realize that, that it really is so much of an issue. So Sanjay, you're talking anyway. So fast forward to 10 years, and let's say, all of this accelerating action has worked, and we have improved inclusivity. What do you think some of the key decisions or steps that would have been made to get there?
So before I go there, I have a question, right? So March 8th was International Women's Day. We are almost a week up. 1 week has passed more. Do you think all the enthusiasm and actions which we were seeing on March 8th, they are still visible? Or they have tapered down? And if they have tapered down, if that's your answer, I think that's the problem to fix. Because people celebrate International Women's Day as one-day event, and it is not pervasive. It's not something which is felt in every single aspect and action of your working life or personal lives. Then largely it's also attributed to only work life, right? There are a lot of women who are not working, right? They may be doing different kinds of jobs, businesses. So how do you drive inclusivity across the board? Today, in this day and age, despite I talked about 115 years of this IWD even starting, if I'm not wrong, and my memory serves me right, only 50 of the Fortune 500 companies today are led by women leaders, right? Despite so many years. And why is that so? The fact remains that so many women leaders, they actually do excellent, they have excellent academic qualifications from the universities, Ivy League institutions, and so on, but they don't reach the very top. So there is some kind of a glass ceiling somewhere which needs to be broken. And that's probably because of the cognitive as well as the unconscious biases people have, right? So how do you break those biases, and how do you ensure that this becomes not a one-day event? I would rather expect, you asked me about 10 years down the line, I would rather expect that there is no International Women's Day. The need of International Women's Day is not felt because it's so pervasive and so ubiquitous across the board, right? So there are just leaders. There is no woman leader or a man leader, right? It's just leaders across the board. And in terms of some of the steps or actions I think that we'll have to take, I think there is a lot of opportunity to create multiple vehicles around training, around mentoring various people across different levels of the organizations. Mentoring cannot be only restricted to people at the highest level where there are certain leadership programs. Invariably, that's what happens in organizations. And people at the lowest level potentially get only some kind of a technical training, right? So how do you hone skills at different levels? I think that's a very important aspect. How do you ensure that there are targets which are set? So when you are hiring someone, when you are onboarding someone, across different levels, there are very clear targets that are established, because without a goal being set, all the activities will not necessarily be, they will not yield what you expect it to, right? So I think you have to set a goal. And then I also feel that the gender pay gap difference that Marnie was talking about earlier, I think it's 83 cents to $1, right? But a lot of changes have happened for the same job today in US. It's 83 cents to $1. So how do you bring it at a parity, right? So I think those are few steps that we'll have to take collectively and ensure that that makes us believe that in 10 years' time, things will change, right? I think, and last but not the least, I think one of the other actions that we should take right now is that today, if you are onboarding a woman leader, how do you make her contribution a lot more visible to people and create role models out of that? How do you celebrate success stories so that you have a huge pipeline of future leaders, right? Because you're not addressing one problem, you're addressing a very big problem. So how do you create a pipeline of leaders so that tomorrow, as we go along, 10 years down the line, there is enough buoyancy and there is enough bandwidth of great women leaders who can take up different roles?
That's wonderful insight, Sajay. And before this, we were actually talking as we were prepping, for this, and we were also talking about the fact that inclusivity is probably even within women is wider, because women have different stages of life, have different parameters, and we tend to have one picture of of a senior woman, and we apply that with the family, with kids, or whatever. There is a picture we have, and that differs across women, and we face that too. And when we're talking inclusivity, then even wider than women, how do we actually make it happen? So that journey is certainly very challenging. And Mani, I think there are people like us who are trying to be torchbearers. What do you think is the role that torchbearers will play in this journey that Sanjay talked about?
No, I think that it's very important as a woman leader and growing that, you make sure to play the role that I referenced, like be on someone's board of directors, participate in sponsorship and networking, be able to share your experiences. I think that a lot of times, especially younger generation, are maybe not as vocal to ask for that support and ask for that help, but instead be proactive and offer it. Put yourself in the position to share your experiences, share your opportunities. Don't wait for someone else to give you the voice to share your successes. Share them yourself, make them known. I think that a lot of times women and just people in general can view that as bragging. And don't view it as bragging. View it as, I'm trying to share my experience to benefit someone else. I had this challenge and I overcame it. This is how I overcame it. Or this is a challenge I had that was more difficult to overcome, and now that I can look back, this is how I would do it. Or times have changed and this is how I would tackle it. And I think having conversations like this is really the differentiator, being able to, voice those things and have those conversations and be available in the company to, if your company offers a mentorship program, offer to be a mentor to someone who's younger. Man, woman, doesn't matter. And be able to put yourself in that position rather than wait for someone to ask you. I think sitting around and waiting, nothing's ever going to happen. So if we're more proactive and step up, then I think that that's really how we make a difference.
And perhaps even speak up when we feel discrimination, or when we feel it's not happening right. And that's the other thing I think as women sometimes we hesitate to do. I think anybody who falls into that diversity category, you hesitate to speak up about it. There's some kind of, you don't want to be different maybe, or you don't want to speak up. And I think that also, speaking up against it when we see it happen, not only to others but to us, there is that hesitation, right? And I think I feel that that's something that we also need to get past.
I do, and just to comment on that, I do think that's part of breaking a gender bias. I think that women are like, oh, they're going to think I'm complaining, or I'm emotional, or something like that, and it's like, no, well, I'm just defending myself, or I'm having a voice for someone who doesn't want to have a voice, and I think that is part of, breaking the stereotypes and breaking the gender bias and how you handle yourself. And, I think, as Nicole mentioned, speaking with confidence, that I know I have the answer, I know I'm in the right, and how you present your case, or, how you speak to your defense, that kind of thing, doesn't have to be viewed as emotional. And if they view it that way, it still shouldn't stop you from saying something, especially if it's protecting, setting up boundaries, protecting your self-care, something like that.
What do you feel, Jenny?
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't even have to be as formal as what you're talking about, right? Because, sometimes you just need someone who has your back, who can give you a second set of eyes to look at your messaging and make sure that, are you putting it in such a way that it can't be viewed from different perspectives, right? You want to make sure you're controlling that messaging. So, having people who, something happens at work, you get frustrated. You can just do the email, right? And then take a step back, right? Have someone else take a look at it and say, hey, does this come off as snarky? I do this a lot, by the way. Does it come off as snarky? And then they'll, well, maybe a little bit. because you need to have someone who's going to be honest with you, right? But I think we need to do that for each other. And by the way, this doesn't matter, man, woman. I have people, at the company where, we're like, hey, are you reading this the right way? And we're like, oh, you could probably tweak this a little bit, because you have a group behind you who has your back. Because it's not a competition. We're here to support each other. And just because you're helping someone else doesn't mean it takes away from you doing, and your journey. It's actually, kindness doesn't cost anything.
Some of the AI tools like Copilot seem to be helping also, because when you write, it tells you the tone,
seriously.
right?
The tone thing?
Yeah, exactly. And I keep thinking nowadays that after a point, probably all our mails will look and sound the same,
right,
because Copilot would have written it
right.
down. But yes, I see what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
And Sanjay, what do you think, what would be your reaction, or have you seen this, when somebody speaks up, then what is the reaction from the other side? How would you react, what does it feel like? And would you encourage, what kind of tone would you encourage to make that happen?
Well, it depends about what they're talking about, right, first of all, right? Whether is it the right forum or not, right? And if the forum is right, then absolutely you should encourage that. I think one of the other thing which I've seen, and probably that has a segue into the next set of topics that you might have. I think one of the things that I feel is a lot of people feel about certain issues very passionately, but they don't necessarily talk about it. They might extend support in isolation, one-on-one, but as soon as it comes about, to sharing that vocally, publicly, I think they kind of feel a little cagey, right? So how do you ensure that you create a culture where people can share that, right? I think that's very important. I think in today's age and time, the relationship between people in the office has to be a lot more friendly. Mm-hmm. Anyway, people have been working from homes, point we were discussing earlier, right? So the familiarity quotient, the EQ quotient, they've all gone for a toss. You hardly spend time with each other in person. So how do you create an environment where the people that you work with, they feel a lot more close to you emotionally, right? How do you create that environment? I think, at least in our business unit, that's what we've tried to do, and it has worked for many number of years. I'm glad that the teams work very cohesively. They have that kind of a bonding, and we really value and respect that.
So I will skip a few questions and come to a question I had a little later in the list, mm-hmm. which is exactly what you talked about. Now, a very big, an important component of this entire journey is allyship. Mm-hmm. And I've seen you, Sanjay, over many years, being an ally, being a mentor, being a sponsor, and you mentioned, having very diverse teams. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about this journey. What do you think works, and how do you think it impacts the overall, the business and the team?
Sure. I think I'll take a leaf out of one of the policies that we have. So what happens is, while we have established HR policies of hiring and onboarding people, we introduced a buddy program, right? So when someone joins, there is a buddy that is assigned to that person. And a buddy is someone who spent more number of years in the organization. They understand things which are not spoken or written, but they can still share those with the new joiner. Now, that definitely helps, and we've seen that a lot of people get to exchange things that they would otherwise hesitate to speak. But that's still very restrictive, so we need to expand that. And to answer your question, the definition of ally could vary from people to people. But from my perspective, ally is someone that necessarily you don't need to formally assign. Allyship has to be there, which is visible in your actions every single day. When you see something which is not being done correctly, or if you see that this is probably an exclusive approach, it's not driving inclusivity, or you see that there is some kind of microaggression element, how do you basically raise a concern at that point in time, right? How do you ensure that you render that support? How do you ensure that whatever privileges you have, given the position that you hold in the organization, can you potentially create opportunities and visibility quotient for that person? Can you ensure that you put them on the promotion path, or maybe some kind of a training nomination, and so on and so forth? Because a lot of people, they very quickly feel that, if they say something, they potentially will not get the opportunity, and then they stop saying things. So how do you encourage, how do you support that? How do you ensure that people get that recognition is very important. I've seen criticism comes pretty quickly, but celebration and appreciation of people is something which is rare. Even I've seen some of the win notes which people send, they find it very difficult to spell out everyone's name, right? For example, in our industry, when we get it's a hard-fought win, you would want to write down everyone's name who's contributed to that win, right? Some people just write one person's name, and I find it a little odd. So I think giving that opportunity to everyone is important. Now, coming to specific question that you asked about allyship in our unit, what we've seen is we've been very focused on having women leaders playing role of a finance partner, of a HR partner, of marketing partner. Our chief architect is also a woman leader. And we've always benefited a lot out of that because A, they have set examples. Our gender diversity ratio in general in the BU has gone up significantly. We expect that all the team members also take a cue and, when they are hiring someone for their respective open positions, they first give opportunity to a woman leader potentially. So I think if we can create an environment where any single person when they join, or every single person when they join, they feel that they are in an environment where someone is supporting them so that they can share their concerns, their issues that they might be facing, and there are actions. It's not only support in isolation, but there are actions being taken.
Thanks, Sanjay. What do you think, Jenny?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this because, we're talking about it from are you a female ally? But the reality is that everybody can, okay, my mic's not working? It is. I'm good? Okay, so I don't need that. Okay, so, to me, an ally is non-specific. It doesn't have to be a male ally, which is awesome that you're an ally, but honestly, I also look at it as other females need to be allies too, because, we've all had very different journeys. And, one of the things I can say is we have a women's ERG at my company, and it's been wonderful, but it has been eye-opening for me to talk to other women who have had different journeys, different challenges, and, making sure that we are supporting one another. And by the way, it's not just women. It's anybody who is different from you. Yeah. Anybody who's different from you. You can be an ally, and you need to make sure that you're calling out and you're creating a safe space. And that, one thing that kind of really popped in my head was you always have that core group of people when new opportunities come up. It's always you got that handful of people that, oh, this would be great for so-and-so. Take a step back and look at, is there others? The quieter people, give them an opportunity to participate, to say something. You're missing out opportunities. Some of the quieter people on my team actually have some of the most insightful, opinions on things that I just, but you kind of have to help them kind of get it out and make it safe for them, call on them, because they're not just going to just put themselves out there. So if you create a safe space, sure. That also helps. So, I think it's really just being kind, right? And
that's lovely insight you brought, that diversity, and we keep talking about diversity. Diversity is in so many things, right? It's not only gender, it's not only race, it's not only background, it is personality too. Yep. And it is everything that's gone into making a person what they are, that's making them different. Right. And I've had similar experience, Sanjay, that when you have the more diverse a team you have, the more fun it is. And I think it brings in so many unique perspectives that those teams really end up, if you actually create that inclusivity into the team, not only put the team together but also make it work like that, you can actually have amazing impact out of those teams. So thank you very much, Janine and Sanjay. So bias can show up in many ways, right? And you talked about, for example, promotions and growth, hiring. So Nicole, what do you think organizations can do to prevent bias in decision making, to prevent bias in some of these very important milestones to growth?
Yeah, I think it's always a tough question, right? Because a lot of people are not always aware of your inherent biases. So I think the most important thing that you can do is have the variety of voices. So when you are interviewing people, bring in people that may be very different from you to be a secondary interview. If you are looking at profiles, bring people that you don't necessarily see eye to eye with or have different backgrounds. They're playing in different roles. Maybe you need the extra pair of eyes. As you were talking about, just to help level set before you are reacting. I think the other thing that's really important that you sort of touched on already is there are so many cultural differences around the world between people, between personalities, where it can be interpreted to yourself because of how you view things. So I think there's a lot of really wonderful training programs that help you question yourself and how people communicate, how you respond to that communication. I think making sure that you're constantly challenging yourself to make sure that you're stepping outside your own lens and bringing in others for those situations that you can have that baseline opinion, because it is a tragedy when you think of quieter people that maybe don't speak up as much, but they're the ones who, if you look at their contributions, have contributed the most. They don't necessarily advocate vocally for themselves in a lot of ways, and they can get overlooked, and it's a detriment to yourself and to your teams, your companies. So I think having the wherewithal to continue to challenge yourself and to ensure that you're bringing in disparate people and personalities and perspectives as you're approaching new roles or new opportunities is really important.
And have you seen that change? And we've been doing so much over the years to try and change that, right? Have you seen that in your career? Have you seen a change happen?
I do. I mean, I think I'm very lucky in that I've worked with a global company. So you are constantly having to keep your own perspectives in check, because you are working with people that come from entirely different backgrounds and have just culturally different norms. And so I'm fortunate in that aspect. But I do think where I have started to see more of an impactful change is in how leadership roles are getting. There's just much more of an active focus on questioning how people are being put into roles. And I think not just at the senior level, which is important, but in every single level that people interact with. So whether you have directors or managers or your day-to-day line support, having that visibility across every avenue, I have seen improvement. I think we still have a long way to go, but I do see a much more concerted effort in ensuring that we are bringing in, or at least questioning why we don't see that level of inclusion or diversity.
Yeah. What do you think, Mali?
Oh, no, I would agree wholeheartedly. I think that it's, there's definitely been some levels of improvement there. I do think there's a lot more opportunity. There's a lot more discussion, open discussion. I think, years ago it was like a taboo topic. And that making those things more acceptable to talk about or have a voice in, or being able to voice concerns or show interest in, really kind of changes that dynamic. But I do think that, to a lot of the points raised, it's also, we have to be active about making that change and who we're bringing into the company, what different roles, making sure that we are being, conscious of our hiring, of who we're bringing into the organization, not just, what this skill set necessarily, but are they a cultural fit of the direction that we want to go in? And there's a lot of things to consider, I think, in hiring practices to be able, that's a real opportunity to make change, right? Is who you're bringing into your organization, and, where are the areas of opportunity, not just, we have to change what we're doing now, but looking forward to the future of where you want to be.
Sure. So, Janine, what do you think are some practical steps that have created the biggest impact in terms of our move towards inclusivity in an organization?
Yeah, I think it's definitely around lead by example, right? We talked about the active listening, so keeping those open lines of communication. The recognition, that is just so huge, and I always have to oh God, I got to remember, this is awesome, to congratulate people. It doesn't even have to be a huge thing, but just an acknowledgement that they're valued and that you appreciate what they're bringing to the table. I would say creating safe spaces to have conversations. I briefly mentioned our women's ARG, and that was really surprising to me. I joined not because it was something I was particularly passionate about. I just thought I should. And it has become a passion because what I've realized is some of it is generational. So for those Gen X's out there, right, our whole thing is you just kind of, suck it up and deal with it. That's what you have to do, right? that's not necessarily the way that you want the next generations to have to deal with some of these challenges, you know, and that if we can make things better, that they don't have to deal with it, right?
Sure.
And so they have a good path forward. And, you know, things are a lot more difficult than when we were growing up, you know, social media and, you know, all sorts of things like that. So I feel like, you know, getting that view is critically important. Getting the diversity of thought is really, really critical, because then you're sitting there, instead of, again, it's just not all what I think, it's getting different perspectives, and you may not agree with them, and that's okay too, but at least it's kind of forcing you out of your comfort zone. Sure. And it's really easy to surround yourself with like-minded people, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure if you looked at most of my close friends, you know, we're pretty similar, we're very direct, you know, we're kind of all very, very, very similar personalities, but you need others to really kind of push you out of your comfort zone to think about things in a different way. So.
I had a mentor who used to say that, you know, you really need to walk in the other person's shoe to understand what inclusivity is.
Right.
Because you haven't really felt it. Although every time I say that and I see beautiful shoes like yours, I feel that I'd love to walk in them. But that aside. And I thought that was a very good practical thing. So what he tried to do is always put us in projects with somebody who's very different from you. So you learn, and you learn it much more closely. So I think a lot of these kind of things, you know, certainly helps. Sanjay, do you have anything to add?
No, I think what you're saying is absolutely right. How do you create an environment where there are people with different kinds of strengths, right? I mean, complementary strengths. And I look at our own business unit. I think there are a lot of people sitting right here who can push you out of your comfort zone very quickly, right? So, so I think it's a good mix. I think the key is to what Marnie was saying earlier, is to figure out how do you break the biases. And you can potentially target the cognitive biases, but the unconscious biases that people have, how do you fix them? Because people don't even know that they have a bias, right? I think that's the problem. So that's something that we need to deal with.
Yeah, and you know, living the other person's, you know, experience. So I have a 9-year-old, and like, you know, most people, I'm always after him in the afternoon when he's back from school to do some work. Like, oh, you're reading comic books, you're playing games, so do some work. So a couple of weeks back, he turned around and said, Mama, I'm doing my homework. What are you doing? You are watching TV. So then it struck me that that's true. You know, I've finished work for the day and I'm just relaxing, and he's finished his school. So after that, I've gotten into the habit of sitting around and doing some work with him so that he feels that, you know, so I can understand. So I think more of that, where we can really experience what another person is feeling, will really enable us to, you know, bring about. I interrupted you. You were saying something.
Well, I was going to say, like, you know, we kind of briefly touched on the whole training thing, right? And sometimes the training is checking a box. Like, let's be honest, right? You're reading and it's just like, oh, okay, I got to finish it because it's mandatory and I have to do it. And then some of it really resonates with you, right? And I think we need to focus on the things that resonate more than the checking the box, because that will open your eyes. Like, you know, we all have people that we don't, you know, we're not overly fond of, and then sometimes, you know, they'll be talking about something and you're kind of rolling your eyes, right? You got to force yourself out of that, because just because you're not a fan doesn't mean they don't have good ideas. And I actually really struggle with this one. So for me, sometimes if it's someone that I just, you know, I just don't have a connection with, they just, you know, whatever. You don't have to love everybody you work with, right? Then, you know, you have to kind of force yourself to say, wait a minute, they might have a really good idea. And just because it's coming from them doesn't mean it's not a good idea. And I think that forces you with that bias as well. It's a little bit more conscious, to be honest, but, you know, you still have to kind of put yourself out there to force yourself out of that.
So coming back to, you know, women in leadership, what can organizations, you know, and all of us do to encourage more women in leadership? Nicole, what do you think?
So I think there was a stat, which I will butcher, and apologies, but that men will apply for a position when they are 75–80% qualified, and women will not apply unless they
have
meet
100%.
every single mark that's being asked for. And I use that, but in general, imposter syndrome is real. Everybody has it, not just women, everyone has it. I think culturally, more often than not, women take that as their own hindrance, as if they have to achieve more to get to the next possibility. And so I think helping people break that, just what is the harm? The worst that happens is you are in the same position you were when you applied. So go after that goal. If it doesn't work out, what was the feedback from why it didn't work out? And that's your path to work on. So I think changing our own mindset and having advocates, having your board of directors encourage you to be like, why not? I mean, you do more than you think you do on paper, whether it's likes, whether it's tasks that you did within a job. Maybe it wasn't your title on a project, but you did all these things. I think embracing the skill sets in a different perspective and allowing people to go after things they may not feel that they're ready for yet is going to help make the opportunity there, because you can't change it if you're not applying for it. So I do think that how can we all help each other, and women to women, allies, all allies in general, how can we help bridge that gap? And I say this to friends all the time, and I'm guilty, and I have to remind myself, talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend. How would you encourage your best friend to go after something? You see all of the wonderful capabilities and skills that they have. How would you encourage them to go after that? That's how you should treat yourself.
Sure.
And then do you think that this is different in, when we say leadership, we somehow, at least I get a picture of a certain level, right? So do we think that it is different the way this gets treated at different levels in terms of actually, encouraging women to grow towards leadership? So then as a personal example, I saw at Virtusa we have, leadership programs, and some of them aimed at women leaders. And I saw that the amount of enthusiasm and excitement that a lot of the junior women had, growing into their career was much higher. Because I think that, and that probably is very good, because if you catch them at that level, then they probably have a much, more runway to sort of, grow into. What do you think?
Well, before I respond to that, I was thinking about a question, and that question is to all of you. I've seen a lot of women leaders, and if you look at their teams necessarily don't have too many women employees, right? So is it some kind of a worry that, if I hire more women leaders, I would be seen as biased towards them, or is it something else? Because invariably I've seen that women leaders necessarily do not have, more number of women leaders with them. So what do you think could be the reason?
So it's funny, on my team it's actually split, because I look for the people best for the role, and I don't look at gender as a determining factor, right? Like, I'm not going to hire someone just because they're a woman or a man or any gender, like, it's not part of my decision making. I think finding the right person for the role, and sometimes women are better suited, or personality, a man's better, it doesn't really matter. I think that can be true, but then I find sometimes that those might not be allies. And that is, it's an unusual spot to be in, but I don't see that very often, at least in my experiences. I think that that's really changed, and that, when there is a woman in a leadership position like that, they kind of may garner a reputation, and that could be problematic, right? And you want to be hiring the people best suited for the role. That is because my team's success is my success.
Sure, yeah.
And I shouldn't care about those things when hiring the people who are going to make the team most successful. So I would disagree where I don't see that, at least not where I am in my company at all. Like, it's a very, I think, diverse culture, and it's most focused on who is the right fit, who is the right person, because the company's, personal success of a person is the company's success. And I think when companies want to be successful, those kind of things don't become part of the decision. And that's where the real change that I think should be happening with companies. It shouldn't matter. Like, that shouldn't even be a discussion point. It should be, who are the best people to do the job? Who are the best people to make our company most successful? So, in my personal career experiences, I see that less and less now, which I think is a great thing, but I don't view that as a challenge today.
I agree with you, and I feel the same with a little bit of a difference. yes, the best person for the best fit person for the role. But I've expanded to, again, a little more than women. What I've found is that, again, diverse teams have great impact if you can, bind them well together. And that's what I've tried to do. So besides seeing the best fit, I do try to see if the team is diverse. And that diversity is not only gender diversity, which we have actually a good amount of in the team, but is diversity in very many different ways. And that, I think, has worked very well, not only for the team as a whole, but I think for the people within the team too, in the ways that, that we all grow. What do you think, Jenny?
I mean, yeah, I agree. I'm not worried about people, and if they think I hire too many women or men, it's not a thought that crosses my mind.
Yes.
I will say, though, I do try to take stock if I do see lack of representation across teams. I will take stock and ask myself why. Like, is it because we've merged teams and people have moved? Do I need to make a change so that we can address the makeup of certain teams? But when I'm hiring, no, because at the end of the day, their ability to do their job is on me, so I'm making sure that I'm preparing whomever is in that role, and I don't think about people being
Super.
concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually seen it both ways. When you go into the highly, because I'm in IT, when you go in the highly technical roles, oftentimes when you're looking for a higher level leadership role with a technical background, you may not get a single resume from a female. And that to me is disturbing. I'm seeing that change though as time is going on, because we're starting to build up the ranks of, our IT technical resources that are female, so they're starting to, move their way up in the organization. But I personally, I'm also split with my teams. So, maybe even leaning a little bit more women, actually, when I think about it now. But the highly technical ones are the ones where I think we still have an opportunity to kind of build that pipeline, because I just don't think it's quite there to the level of leader,
Sure.
When you're getting into like an IT senior leader.
Sometimes probably also what I have seen is the logistics of the role. So there's one team we have that actually works, pretty late at night. They work a U.S. time zone shift. And there we find that there are a lot more men.
Yeah.
Right.
But again, I'm very happy to see, and I'm very pleasantly surprised to see more and more women joining that team. So yeah, sometimes it can be that too, but yeah.
Well, we actually see that in our sales organizations as well. Like when you're talking about insurance sales, it's very difficult for women who, when they're trying to have families. How are you on the road every week? How are you taking time for maternity when you have all these cases in the pipeline? What happens to that when you're trying to close your business and install it and stuff like that, and you're on maternity leave? Like those are very real challenges that I actually had no idea about until we did the women's ERG, and we started talking to our sales leaders about why is there such a small representation of women in our sales organization, and it is getting better, and some of our sales leaders are really focused on how do they bridge that gap with women of childbearing age who want to have families and want to take time off, and how do you do that without hurting the sales relationships with the brokers?
No, it is a compromise. I mean, I did it myself. I did sales and P&L roles forever and loved it, and then actually consciously took a step back and took a non-sales role when I had a kid, because it's very difficult to balance. So absolutely.
In fact, I think the biggest conundrum that is going to be there is not to hire a team member who's a male or a female, but whether you're going to hire a bot or a human.
Right.
So,
That is true.
Good point.
But I do think that's something that companies have to think about when it comes to work-life balance, which I know we were talking a lot about. That flexibility, that support, that kind of environment to be able to, promote women into leadership roles, and men. There are plenty of men who want to take paternity leave, who want to do these things, single dad. So it's not just an issue for women. I think it's the most prevalent or maybe the most public, but the truth is that there are plenty of men, and if we want to play the reverse, who don't want to talk about it, who don't want to ask, who don't want to do these things, and that being able to have a basic work-life balance regardless of gender is very crucial, especially, I think Nicole might have some thoughts on this topic about how COVID changed that and all of that, so.
Yeah, let's talk about balance.
Yeah, so I feel very passionate about work-life balance. And I think COVID made everyone's world change in many, many ways, but especially in the way that we work. I think when COVID came and everyone was forced to work from home, it really changed the way we work, and it really changed how we work with each other. I think hours increased dramatically. I think the lack of boundaries increased dramatically. People had meetings starting earlier, going later because you weren't commuting, you knew the person was at home. People's calendars suddenly became like an optional thing where regardless if time was booked or not, you're getting triple, quadruple.
Six is my record.
At the same time, like, just a lot of that really, really changed. And it was really difficult now that we're out of COVID and how people are adjusting back. Because I don't think we've seen the decrease in expectations for your hours and for how you work. And it is now with changes of people returning back to offices and people that are like across the board, it is created less balance in general. And I think balance means so many things to different people. People with families, again, women, more often than not, certainly not exclusively, are assumed to have to figure out their life work position after their work job. People who don't have families expected to pick up the slack because they're trying to do right by their teammates or their coworkers who do have families, and then they're getting burnt out. I think just in general, it has been really difficult for people to figure out what the new world really looks like and how to make it sustainable.
True.
True.
Now, speaking of balance, I'm sorry, but I have to balance, the needs of time with the wish,
That was nice.
with the wish to continue this. It has been an excellent, discussion, and I'd love to continue. But I have somebody behind the camera who has been telling me 5, 5, 5. So I guess I have to wind this up. But thank you so much, panelists, for sharing your insights and your perspectives. Time flies when you're having fun. So, and I'd especially like to thank some of the panelists who came back to us after, second time this year, after last year. So I guess, we are having fun, and I hope to, see more of this as we go ahead. And I think the first steps towards, moving towards this inclusive world that we are talking about is actually for us to have more conversations, and for us to connect more, for all of us to share more and be comfortable doing that. And I think that's one of the core, parts of inclusivity, which is it's not an HR mandate, it's not a policy, it's not, nice themes. It is all of us understanding that it impacts all of us. It is not one race, one gender. The differences don't lie there. The differences lie everywhere. And once we are aware of that and start thinking like that, and as we spoke earlier, I thought it was beautiful when you talked about focus, that we actually think about this and are mindful about this in our conversations. We will certainly, together move towards, hopefully, an earlier time than 2158 to arrive at, greater parity and to arrive at, get greater equality. And in the meantime, we'll have great fun talking about it and, sharing insights and perspectives. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you so much for this conversation. I had lots of fun, and I hope you did too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. You want us to stand up? Yeah. Okay. All right.